So my talk is about multiple traveling waves for the Euler-Korteweg system. And before defining what this is, I will describe the Euler-Korteweg system. So it looks a lot like the Euler equations. If you look at the left-hand side, this is just Euler. But of course, in the second equation, you have this big term with third-order derivative of rho. And this term is actually supposed to model the effect of capillary forces in a compressible, inviscid fluid. Okay, and this is actually a dispersive perturbation. So I should say right now that there is no natural sense of time here. You can go forward or backward, it doesn't matter. It is the same thing in terms of well-posedness. There is no dissipation issue at all. Okay? So K here is a smooth coefficient, which is positive, but it is not necessarily bounded near zero. A priori, it can be unbounded near zero, and actually, there are some very relevant cases where it is not bounded. So, for example, a very important case is the case where K is actually equal or proportional to 1 over rho. So, in this case, we obtain what is called the quantum hydrodynamic system, and in the special case where the velocity is an irrotational field, this is actually exactly equivalent to the nonlinear Schrödinger equation. So when I say that this is a dispersive equation, yes, it really is, because it is equivalent to the most classical dispersive equation that can be, I guess. So this is NLS, and the transformation is just the transform is just written here. You define psi as the square root of rho times e height theta, and here the velocity is just the gradient of theta. So of course some issues are related with this transform. It is not very well defined if rho cancels, but as long as you don't have vacuum, everything makes sense, and this is really an equivalence. Okay, but I mentioned this equivalence just to convince you that this is a dispersive equation, but I won't use this at all during the talk, okay? I am here, I am interested in the general case where K is just a positive function and G is also a function which is smooth. Okay, so I'm interested in the general case. This is just to say that this is a dispersive equation. Okay. So a few results on the Euler-Korteweg system, though I won't be exhaustive at all, okay? There are lots of results on this equation, and actually I think that this afternoon Jan Gisselman will talk a lot about things that I don't really know, okay? So I just focus on well-posedness on the existence of strong solutions. So the first theorem of well-posedness was due to Sylvain Benzoni, Raphael, and Stéphane Descombes, and they proved the local well-posedness near some initial data with no vacuum, and this is basically the well-posedness in the space that you expect for a quasi-linear hyperbolic system. So this is hs plus 1 times hs for the density and the velocity, with s which is larger than d over 2 plus 1. Basically, this is the assumption to ensure that the velocity is Lipschitz. Okay. So there has been some other results on the time of existence. So Bethuel, Danchin, Smed prove long time existence in the long wave regime, in the special case where this is equivalent to Schrödinger, and actually later with Boris Haspot, we prove that if the dimension is large enough, and you have some irrotational initial data which are small enough, close to a constant state, and with some stability assumption, which is that the derivative at the constant state of the pressure is positive. Then we have global well-posedness and scattering. So this is a purely dispersive theorem. This is the most standard theorem for dispersive PDEs. If the dimension is large enough, then due to the dispersive decay, you have a global well-posedness, and in the end, it looks like the solution is linear. Okay, so this is about well-posedness. And there are also some results on the existence of special solutions. So special solutions here are solitons and kinks. So just to make clear what a soliton and a kink is. A soliton is something which has the same limit at minus infinity and plus infinity, and a kink is something like this. So this kink looks like a front, and the soliton is this one. So again, Sylvie, Raphael, and Stéphane Descombes prove the existence of solitons and kinks in dimension 1. So this is the ODE argument, I guess. And there are some stability that I will describe a little bit more later. And I proved also the existence of solitons in dimension 2 by variational arguments. And actually, in this talk, I will focus on issues in dimension 1 only. But before I state the main result of this talk, I need to introduce the variational formulation of the Euler-Korteweg system. So there is formally an Hamiltonian, which is, if you want, an energy. So this quantity here is conserved. And you see that there is a difference in smoothness between the velocity and the density. So basically, to simplify things, just think that U is controlled in L2 and rho is controlled in H1. So if you remember the result of well-posedness just before, this explains why you have rho in HS plus 1 and U in HS. Rho is one time more smooth than U. So you have this Hamiltonian, and the Euler-Korteweg system can be written thanks to this. So just to define a notation, the variational derivative, so this is this quantity here. So this is just used to say that if you have something like h of v plus epsilon, this should be equal to h of v plus the scalar product of delta h of v scalar epsilon. And to me, there is no scalar product except the L2 scalar product. Okay, so nothing exists. This is just the integral of the product. Okay. So this is the first order variational derivative, and of course you can differentiate as long as you want. And I don't want to differentiate a lot. I won't go beyond order 2. So I will need these two quantities, and this will be most useful because I don't want to write these quantities, okay? This is just a simple way to write the equations. And so finally, the Euler-Korteweg system, it reads just like this equation. So this is really, it looks a lot like an Hamiltonian system. You have the derivative of V, where V is rho and U, this is a vector, which is some anti-symmetric operator applied to the variational derivative of H. So this is really Hamiltonian, and it explains clearly why H is conserved. And actually, due to the invariance by translation, there is another conservation law, which is the momentum. So just a few words about the fact that I have been cheating a bit so far. I deal here with solutions that are not zero at infinity, okay? rho is not 0 at infinity, and u is not 0 at infinity. So of course, the integral here at the top of the board, it does not converge, okay? So just to give some sense, you have to do some rescaling. And it's meaningless, okay? This is just, you have to add some constants, and in the end, they disappear, so it doesn't matter at all. You have this momentum, which is here. You can choose to define it rescaled or not rescaled. And now, with this formalism, it's more simple to describe solitary waves. So a traveling wave is just a solution which is of the form v of x minus ct. So if you plug this ansatz in the Euler-Korteweg system, you obtain exactly the system of equation here. Okay, so if you look a bit carefully at this, you see that the terms with a c in factor, this is exactly the variational derivative of p. The other terms, this is exactly the variational derivative of h. So you have a compact way to write this, which is just that a traveling wave satisfies this equation, which is, of course, much easier to write than the equation above. So to obtain the second equation, I have integrated in space, because you see, in the first system, you have dx everywhere. So once you do some integration, you have some constant, which is due to the fact that you are not 0 at infinity. And this is the equation satisfied by a traveling wave. At this point, I should point out that this is a quite simple system, actually, because if you look at the first equation, after integration, you have u, which is an explicit function of rho. And in the second equation, this is just a second order differential equation in rho. So this can be perfectly integrated almost explicitly. So this is not really a problem to solve this system and to justify that there exist traveling waves. The existence is not really an issue. Okay, more interesting is the stability of such waves. And actually, this was due again to Benzoni, Danchin, and Descombes. They proved that this system admits indeed kinks and solitons. And more importantly, kinks are always stable, and solitons are stable if you have some condition on what is called maybe the Boussinesq, at least Sylvie Benzoni calls it the Boussinesq momentum. Okay, I put some quotes on stable, because there's something to say about this. The stability is stability à la Griakis-Chata-Strauss, if you know this. So this is just stability in the energy space. So it means that as long as the solution exists, it stays close to a soliton in the energy space, but unfortunately, the problem is not well posed in the energy space. So it means that as maybe some blow-up occurs in H3, but at least until the blow-up time, you stay close in H1. So this is a very weak type of stability, but it's still a result. And so the stability condition is this second-order derivative, which is positive. And I should mention that there is a much simpler version of this, because M is a little bit painful to write. And this is a second order derivative, which is not so simple to check. But actually, when you differentiate M with respect to C, what do you obtain? You obtain the differential of E applied to Vc prime. So here, this is the derivative of Vc with respect to C, okay? Solitons are parameterized by the speed. So this is, maybe it should be clearer if I say this. This is a derivative with respect to speed and not space. V infinity is just a constant, so it disappears. N minus delta E of V infinity dVc to dc. Okay, but, and I forgot something. Since E is h minus Cp, when you differentiate with respect to P, you end up also with minus P evaluated at Vc. And here, these terms, they disappear because you see this is exactly, by definition of V, this is minus C delta P plus delta H, which is a constant. So if you differentiate a second time, this was just a constant. So when you differentiate, this is 0. Therefore, the second derivative of M is just minus dP dC at Vc. So this is a much simpler criterion. And actually, this is not new at all. It is very well known in the field of Schrödinger equations. Okay, but it will be useful later. Okay, so this was just the computation that I did. And what I want to do is the existence of a multiple traveling wave. So it's maybe a bit painful to define on the board. So the best thing is certainly to do a picture. A multiple traveling wave is a profile which looks like a kink and then several solitons. So what does it look like? You have a kink, and after that you have one soliton, and long after that maybe another soliton, and actually I can have as many solitons as I want. So you can have n solitons like this. Okay, and a multiple traveling wave is just something which looks, as time goes to infinity, exactly like this. So this is what I write here. The norm of V of t minus the multi-soliton goes to 0 as n goes to infinity. And everything else is just technical. The level of smoothness and anything, it doesn't matter. Okay? Okay. So there is one thing that I should mention. The soliton, it must be stable in the sense that the derivative of the momentum is negative. And the speed of the soliton must be larger than the speed of the front before. And the speed of the next soliton must be larger of the speed of the soliton before. In other words, you just want that they don't interact at all. Okay? Interaction of solitons is out of the way. You can't deal with this. And I think that the story here on the top with the Aj, which must be large, it just means that at times 0, you want that they are already far away from each other, so that interactions are really minimal. So everything should be larger than A, with A which is large enough. Okay, and once you have all these assumptions, there exists a solution which converges to something which looks like that. Okay. In the end, if I have some time, I will mention that this is not empty. There exist such configurations. It's not obvious, obviously. I mean, you can solve the system, but the existence of stable solitons, which are well ordered in speed, etc., this is not so obvious. So maybe I will say a few words about that. Okay. And now, how do we do this? Well, okay, maybe just a small remark, this is not a stability result at all, okay? We use stable solitons and stable kinks, but it does not mean that if I take any initial data close to a multi-soliton, I will converge to a multi-soliton, okay? This is not true at all. This is given a configuration, there exists one solution which converges to this configuration. So this is not at all the same problem as stability. This is much, much weaker than stability, and actually it is well known for NLS, for example, that there exist multi-solitons that are unstable, but solutions which converge to the multi-soliton. Okay? So this is not, there is a link with stability, but this is not the same thing. Okay, alors, maybe it's the point where I stop using my slide. Okay, and I will just do the rest on the board. The classical approach to prove this kind of result was due for the first time to Martel. I guess it was around 2005, and it was for KdV. So the idea of Martel is to use a compactness argument. This is why this is just an existence result. It says, let S be the multi-soliton. I consider the sequence of solutions, which is defined as follows. You have your PDE of U, and you have the Cauchy data, which is U at T equal N is equal at S at T equal N. And what it does is to say, it says, okay, I have well-posedness for the KdV equation. KdV can go forward or backward in time, it doesn't matter. So I have a solution to this PDE, and actually, since it depends on n, I will call it un. And he doesn't solve it forward, he solves it backwards. He has global well-posedness due to a nice Cauchy theory. Okay? So this is something which is special to KdV. And he says, therefore, un at t equals 0 is well defined. And thanks to some very clever energy estimates, he has the fact that un of t minus s of t it's in some energy space. So for KdV, I guess it's h1 is smaller than the exponential of minus alpha t with alpha a positive constant. So this is the hard part. This is not something that you get just with simple energy estimates. You have to do something clever at this point. And once you have done the hard part, then comes the easy part. It just considers this sequence of un at t equals 0. He uses some elementary compactness argument. He passes to the limits. And in the end, it gives you some initial data u0 and a solution u of t, which by lower semi-continuity of the norm and weak convergence satisfies u of t minus s of t is smaller than c exponential minus alpha t. And this is done. Okay? And this is how it works. So in my case, the hard part is still hard, and actually this part is hard too, because for KdV the energy space is h1, and KdV is globally well posed in h1. So going back at t equals 0, this is not an issue. For me, well posedness is only something like in h3. And the energy space here is h1. So we are far from for well-posedness. So I can't even go back at times t equals 0. So there is something more to do. And actually, this kind of issue, no, so I will write what is the issue. So for Euler-Kurzweil, you can't go back at t equals 0 from t equal n. And this was overcome for the first time by Ming, Rousset, and Setkov for a different equation. This was in 15, and this was for the water waves. And they devised a very ingenious method, actually, which is to construct, they build an approximate solution of their equation, okay? And the approximate solution, this is not an actual solution, but it is defined as the solution of a linear problem. So going backwards in time is not an issue. And on this approximate solution, they managed to use the same ideas as Martel to have still the same estimates. And the idea is that if UN app is nice enough, and if it is close enough to an actual solution, then actually the actual solution must stay so close to UN approximate that it can be defined up to time t equal to 0. And this part is just elementary energy estimates. So actually, the most difficult part in the proof is to construct the approximate solution. Once you have the approximate solution, the construction of an exact solution which exists on 0n, this is an easy consequence of energy estimate. Okay? So I will focus on the construction of an approximate solution. So what you want for the approximate solution, you want that it satisfies the PD. So you want to have dt un app, which is equal. So this is just the Euler-Kurzweil system plus something, because this is not an exact solution. So this is some error term. And the most important thing, yes?
dx of the
yes, there is a dx. Okay, thanks. And the most important thing is that the norm of Fn app should be smaller than, and this is in a Sobolev space of high regularity. So this must be small and very fast, very rapidly decaying. Okay, and the thing which seems the most natural at the start is to say maybe S, the multiple traveling wave, is already a nice solution. Okay, so S is a natural candidate. Because I have not mentioned this yet, but since the front and the solitons are built as a solution of an ODE, they converge exponentially fast at infinity. So, okay, when you plug this in a nonlinear problem, you are not exactly a solution, but the error is just due to these very small interactions. So what you have is already that dTs is equal And this is C infinity, so you have no issue of regularity. But the issue here is that you don't quantify precisely the decay of the traveling waves here. So you have just epsilon exponential minus alpha t alpha small. So this is the main issue. Alpha is small, so this is not a good enough approximate solution to make the scheme work. So how do you overcome this? The thing that you do, there's many possibilities. So I guess that Ming, Rousset, and Tsetkov, they did some Taylor expansion of the initial problem, and like a little bit like a BKW approach, I don't know. Me, I just said, okay, I will do a Newton method. So I define U, the first solution, U0 is equal to S, and then I define by iteration Okay, so this scheme is exactly Newton. Okay, if you remember, Newton is un plus 1 minus un equal minus df of un minus 1 f of un. So this is a Newton algorithm. And so this here, hopefully, is just Newton with f, which is dt minus j dx delta h at u. Okay, so this is just Newton, but of course you have some technical issues when you want to solve this. First of all, you want that the limit as t goes to infinity of sj plus 1 minus aj is 0, so that you converge to the multiple traveling wave. And it's not so clear that there exists a solution to this problem, okay? And actually, to do this, you need some resolvent estimates on this operator here. And it's not so nice because this is not an autonomous operator, okay? It depends on t, so it's a little bit of a mess. And okay, and of course you need to say that each time this becomes smaller, but this is just Newton, so this is not a surprise at all. So the main difficulty is really to be able to solve this. And since this decays exponentially in time, you just need that the growth of in the resolvent estimate, it can be exponential in time, as long as the growth is exponential with a very small power. If it's exponential epsilon t with epsilon small enough, there exists a solution to this linear problem. Okay, so now for the resolvent estimate. So the idea is to mimic the stability of one soliton. So I guess this is not standard for fluid mechanics, but the standard proof of stability of one soliton is just to introduce some energy, which is this, the second order derivative of h at Vc, with Vc the soliton, minus c momentum at Vc. So both of these quantities are quadratic forms. So I apply this to u, with u, which is a solution of the linear system. So with u, which satisfies dt minus j dx delta second h u equals 0. And this is my energy. And actually, when you are at just one single soliton, this here is an energy. This is a conservation law. It is constant in time. Okay, I will just prove that this is constant and say a few words about the case of several traveling waves. What modifications you have to do. So do I have the time to do this? Yes. Okay, so when you differentiate so this quantity, so for simplicity, I will call this the second. So this is the notation that I have introduced before. This is just the derivative of E. So I differentiate this. No, actually, I will stay with H and P. U minus C okay, so this is H VC. I differentiate in T up to some commutator, okay? So this is J dx Okay, maybe at this point, some clever people will have noticed that what I do is completely stupid. This is stupid because when you have just one soliton, you just make a change of variable y is equal to x minus ct, and this becomes an autonomous problem. And for an autonomous problem, you should be able to do things more cleverly. But the thing is that when you have several solitons, this is not autonomous at all. You don't have this change of variable, so you have to do this computation. So something is missing. I have a commutator of dt with this operator. So there is still dt delta second h u. So what happens now? Of course, the two terms here, they eliminate. This is because you have something which is skew adjoint here. So when you move it here, they compensate. So this disappears. When you do the same thing here, you don't have an elimination. And actually, I will use the magical identity, which is not magical at all, but you have this identity. And now what you get is C, the commutator of dx delta second h, u plus dt okay. And now this part of the proof is done because since h only depends on x minus ct, and here it depends on x minus ct, the commutator here is just minus c, the commutator here. So this is just 0. And we're done. So if now you don't have Vc, but you have the multiple traveling wave, what you do is that you can't obviously define this, but you can use localization functions. So what you do is that you define phi1 like this. So you make a partition of unity. So this is phi 1. This is phi 2. And phi 3. You add them in your energy. So you have a sum on J, phi J, minus Cj, phi J. So this is a kind of localized energy. And the same sum stays here. You have some phi J. So basically, up to differentiated phi J, this is still disappearing. Okay. Everything stays true. And here you have the sum Cj, phi J, phi J. And plus, of course, you can't add them for free. You have some commutators. So this is an O of phi J prime. But since the solitons are going away from each other, actually, this is also exponentially decaying. So this is small too. And what happens here is that you are localized close to the soliton of speed Cj. So this sum is almost zero. This is, well, maybe not zero, but this is dominated by exponential minus alpha t. And actually, if A is large enough, you have an epsilon, which is epsilon. So epsilon can be made as small as you want. And so this is almost conserved. And since the constants are as small as you want, basically it tells you that the energy grows like maybe like an exponential, but as slowly as you want, like an exponential. And actually this is quite more involved than that, because this does not control the energy norm. You have, so far, if you see, I have not used the stability assumption. So this controls the H1 norm up to some other directions, and the stability assumption gives you another reason, which is purely algebraic, so that these other directions are also controlled. And well, at this point, this gives you for free the resolvent estimate in the energy space, and you get quite easily the resolvent estimate for higher order Sobolev spaces just by differentiating the equation. Okay, I don't think I have much more time, so I will stop here. Thank you.